Consider this. In the 2020 presidential election, Donald Trump won about 2/3 of rural voters. That dominance is a result of generational efforts by Republicans, with Democrats mostly consolidating their power in the suburbs and big cities on the coasts. But as Congressman Clyburn's comments attest, many House Democrats are urging the party to pay as much attention to the middle of the country as it does to the coasts. Among them, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell of Michigan. She's launching what she calls the Heartland Caucus. And joining me now is Congresswoman Debbie Dingell of Michigan. Congresswoman, welcome back to the Sunday Show.
Jonathan, it's great to be with you, and happy holidays.
Thank you. Same to you. So what exactly is the purpose of the Heartland Caucus?
The purpose of the Heartland Caucus is, quite frankly, I did a map for our caucus a couple of weeks ago, which shows where the leadership is of both our caucus and the chairmanship. And there's this big empty U in the middle of the country. And we are never going to win the majority back unless we work with the Heartland. We lost a number of seats there, which contributed to our losing the majority. And if we're going to win it back, which we will, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we do in 2024, we have to pay attention to the issues, not only of the rural voter, but even that suburban voter that you're talking about, the blue collar, the auto worker that Donald Trump won in 2016, Joe Biden won in 2020, and we got to keep in 2024. And I had some pretty rough town hall meetings right before this election. So we've got to talk to the people who, quite frankly, are the backbone of the American economy in many ways in the heartland. And sometimes we're not the best at doing that.
And to that point, then, what issues are Democrats ignoring as a result of its fixation on the issues of concern to the coasts?
Well, first of all, manufacturing, bringing our supply chain back. You know, by the way, I want to make it really clear that while I raised the point, Joe Biden understands it, because we, as you know, I've had a 30-year fight to have a more diverse state included in the early presidential primaries that reflects those kinds of issues. And about 2 weeks ago, he wrote a letter to the DNC and recommended that Michigan be one of the early primary states. And I'm not saying that Michigan should always be the state that's in there, but there should always be a heartland state that reflects the diversity of this country. But, you know, I'll give you an example. You know, most people didn't believe me in 2016. I said Donald Trump was going to win Michigan. He understood the anxiety in the heart of those union workers who had seen their jobs shipped overseas. Nobody cared about what was happening. If you go to Iowa, you go to some of the rural other states, that jobs where they had seen, you're showing pictures of the farmers, but the farmers are that has been shipped overseas. They can't get the equipment they need. Their meat packing plants are absolutely empty. It's all been shipped overseas. Now we have, and in Michigan, we talked a lot about it in 2022, are starting to bring our supply chain home. We recognize it's not only an economic security issue, it is a national security issue. But we have to be intentional on policy and communicating the policies that we are doing. And we've got a big farm bill coming up next year. The coasts yes, California has large, diverse agriculture, but you know what? Michigan has the #2 agricultural state, diverse agricultural product in the country, and their issues are a lot different than California farmers. A lot of them are family farmers that are struggling to get by, and we had to talk to all of them.
Well, let's keep talking about Michigan, because Democrats did better than expected in the midterms nationally, but they did extremely well in Michigan, where Democrats have control over the legislature and the governorship. Congresswoman, isn't that a sign that the party is talking to more than the coast, or were Republicans just too darn scary to vote for in Michigan?
So I think it's a combination. I'm very proud of the team of people that we have in Michigan. You know, if you were talking to people, I don't believe polls, as you know, but mid-October, some of the polling in Michigan was showing that a lot of these races were very tight. But we were a group of leaders that talked, were flexible on message, understood it could not just be about choice, but we had to talk about the economy and we had to talk about democracy. And I, quite frankly, would argue that much of what was done in the last couple of weeks helped keep the governor there, win the majority. And I'm proud of the fact that in my district, which is a very complicated district and reflects the diversity of the country, from the downrivers, which have strong Trump voters, to Ann Arbor, which is probably like a coastal state, to Western Wayne, which is like much of the heartland. But we elected the state legislatures that helped deliver the majority in both the House and the Senate. And we worked coordinated. We talked every day. We did the walks. We knew what the issues were. We did doors every single day, and we all supported each other. And that's something Democrats have got to really do as we go into 2024.
Mm-hmm. And Congresswoman, is there a potential future where Donald Trump and the Republican Party can somehow dominate rural America and the heartland more than they already do?
So I'm going to tell you right now that to all those that think that, I think it's a long time between now and 2024. I'll be very blunt. I did not have a strong candidate running against me. She didn't return phone calls, any media calls, etc. And yet she still got 37% of the vote without a campaign. That's a Trump base right there in just my district. Donald Trump is strong in Michigan and other states around the country because while he doesn't deliver, he understands the anxiety of a lot of voters who think that he cares about them. We got to do a better job of showing people we care, we understand, but we're going to deliver on solutions for the problems that they're worried about. I never underestimate Donald Trump.